Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Mark with Beyond the Struggle podcast. I am here this evening with Christine. Christine, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good. Long day today. I'm tired. So, Christine, I got you on here. I want to hear your testimonial video, and I like to chop it up before we end the video. Of course, talk to everybody about you and I a little bit and stuff like that, if that's okay with you.
Sounds great.
But after you tell us your testimony, and you can start wherever you want, beginning, end, go backwards, forwards, don't matter to me.
All right. My name's Kristen McGlothlin. I am 36 and I live in a very small town in Arkansas. I am happily married. I have two teenage daughters. One is 16, one is fixing to be 18 on Thanksgiving Day. So I'm a teen mom. Pray for me. I am currently employed as a police officer in our community and have been for the last year. Prior to that, I worked in the emergency department at our local hospital. I was there for 2.5 years. Before that, I was a bail bondsman, and before that, I was a police officer. So I've had several different jobs over the course of my adult life. But I will just jump straight in and start at childhood. I was raised in a very small town called Possum Grape, Arkansas. We had a liquor store and a convenience store, and that was literally it. We lived out in the middle of nowhere. My mom and dad were not married whenever they had me and my sister. I have an older sister. We're actually Irish twins, so we stay the same age for 8 days. Same mom, same dad. We're not a full year apart. We're best friends, though. She's just a little bit older than I am. We lived on a farm right next door to my grandparents, my dad's mom and dad. So they were very influential in my younger life. But at some point in time, I don't know exactly when my mom and dad got married, but my sister and I were probably 4 or 5, if I was guesstimating. That marriage did not last long. My mom went to work at a pharmacy a couple towns over. My dad worked night shift at a factory, so he slept all day and worked during the night. Very blue collar. My mom got hooked up with a lady while she worked at the pharmacy that introduced her to speed. And this lady told her that she could be super mom. She could take the kids back and forth to work or back and forth to school. She could work a full-time job. She could make sure dinner was cooked and the house was clean and just be the best wife and mom that there ever was. So that's when my mom got introduced to meth. And that's where her journey started. But my mom had a very addictive personality. And whenever she touched it, she didn't just dabble, she went full send. And I believe my parents started fighting quite a bit. Then obviously, I was very young. I had no idea why they argued so much. But now looking back, hindsight's 2020. So now I do know why. The fights did get physical sometimes. My dad never did hit my mom. He would restrain her. My mom was normally always the aggressor. And we lived so close to my grandparents that he would literally just send us to their house.
Right.
So my sister and I would just walk to my grandparents' house. It was kind of always like our safe place. Well, eventually it got to the point where they were fighting so much that my dad decided to leave and he went and stayed with my uncle. My mom stayed in our single wide trailer next door to my grandparents. And there were certain memories that I had. My mom was very, I guess, relaxed as a parent. Like if we didn't feel like going to school, we didn't have to go to school. She would just let us stay home. She was more of the friend than she was an actual parent. And we had come home from school. My sister and I got off the school bus one day and we came in and my mom was asleep on the couch and we couldn't get her to wake up. So we went outside. We were screaming. We were very scared. I think I was probably around 7 at this time. So my mom had been in active addiction for several years. And my grandma came, got us, called my dad. And that was whenever my dad made my mom leave, finally. And we stayed with my dad. And my trauma response, I think, is to forget a lot of things. So there are memories that I have that are full memories. And then there's a lot of space in between them where I can just pick bits and pieces out. So my mom would use me and my sister to get my dad to come back around. She was pretty, I would say, manipulative and narcissistic in that way. She would say, hey, call your dad and have him come by to see you guys. And then she would try to either get money from him or get him to stay and so forth, so on and whatnot. But in Arkansas, back in the early 90s, no mom, however unfit she was, would lose custody of her kids. So whenever her and my dad got divorced, my mom got custody of us. At this time, I was about 9. I was actually 8 going on 9. And we had to move to town. So I'd grown up on this farm my entire life, lived out in the middle of nowhere, didn't know anything different, but we had to move into town. My mom had rented a trailer in town in it was a trailer park but it wasn't a very big one. There was only like 4 trailers there. But I was so excited because I got to live right next door to my best friend. And the friend that I'm speaking of, we're still friends to this day. We've been friends for 30 years, and I just thought that was the coolest thing in the whole wide world is I was going to get to live right next door to her. She had a house down the road. And looking back, I can see God's hand in it now because of where my mom rented that trailer. My friend's house was now my safe haven. So,
Yeah.
like, it was by happenstance that that happened. Um, and that was God's will in my life. I'll get more into that in just a minute. So my mom was in active addiction. My sister and I, we kept head lice all the time. There was times that our lights got shut off. Periods of time we didn't have water. We had 2 small dogs that we had in the house, and they would just go to the bathroom all over everything. But we were kids. We weren't made to clean. We weren't made to keep ourselves up. People had stepped in and tried to help. Like my grandma tried to help. My dad would come around and he would try to take us, and my mom wouldn't let us go. I mean, it was just a very, very tumultuous childhood during that time. But my best friend's mom and her dad, who lived right next door, they had a garage, and I just thought that was the coolest thing in the whole wide world. But her mom would leave the garage door cracked about 2 feet, and they had a couch in there, and they had like a refrigerator in there. So when me and my sister would come home, sometimes my mom was home, sometimes she wasn't. We had no idea where she was. She would go out with her drug friends and hang out, or we would come home and she'd be passed out. She'd be crashed out because she couldn't get dope. And we would go to my friend's house and they wouldn't be home. So we would crawl under the garage door. And that's kind of where we would just hang out until they got home, and she would feed us dinner and send us home. So to this day, like, I have to thank her for those provisions over our life, because without
Amen.
them, a lot of different things could have gone really badly. And I mean, if you look back on your life, God's hand is literally all over it, because that girl and I are still best friends to this day. Like, we even go to church together now. So, I mean, it's just amazing how from day one to now, like, we've all, God's always been there with us. Um, One day, like, there was a lot of things that happened. My mom was taking us from one drug house to the next to the next. My sister would have to go get water and wash our clothes in the bathtub just to make sure that we had clothes to go to school. My mom would literally pawn anything that she could get her hands on. She would take us treasure hunting, and treasure hunting would be her and her friends loading us up in cars, and we would go to these abandoned houses out in the middle of nowhere, and they would break in and we would just steal everything and then leave, and then they would take it and pawn it, but we were treasure hunting. So I started my criminal career at the ripe old age of 9. Had no idea that what we were doing was illegal. um a lot of just random how me and my sister managed to get out without being raped is beyond me, because my mom just had so many different people, like, in and out of our lives. Like, it is by God's grace and his grace alone. And I'm convinced that neither one of us were ever harmed in any way.
Yeah.
One day my dad showed up, and my mom had pretty much brainwashed me and my sister that my dad was evil. He was going to try to take us away from her, that we would never get to see her again, just all of the narcissistic things that any drug
Yeah.
addict mom is going to tell her kids. And so when my dad showed up, um, he told us, he said, "Get in the truck." And that was all he said. So we went and got in the truck, and me and my dad got into, I mean, even at 9, 10 years old, like, I was pretty feisty, pretty outspoken. I had second child syndrome, and I had no problem whatsoever speaking my mind. And I told my dad, I was like, "I can't believe you're doing this. This is the wrong thing." He was like, "Your mom's hiding her dope in your silverware drawer." And I was like, "I don't even know what that is. What is drugs? Her cigarettes, to me, that was drugs." But come to find out, there was a lot more going on. So we went to live with my dad. But as I said, my dad worked nights, so we spent the majority of our time at our grandparents' house, which I'm very grateful for. My grandmother took us to church every single Sunday. It wasn't an option if we went, you just got up. If it was not raining, you got up and we went to church. Um, my grandpa didn't go to church at the time, but he started going up right before he passed away. And he did get to witness me and my sister being baptized, so that was quite nice. And then my grandpa died in 1999, and my dad decided to move in with my grandma to help her out because he lived right next door with her anyway. My mom at this time was kind of just in the wind. She would come around for maybe like a day, And then she might stay gone for several days and she would say, "Hey, I'm going to come back and see y'all tomorrow." And tomorrow would never come. And then before we knew it, it had been 3 months. And, my sister and I were sliding into puberty at this time. So we were starting to get a little bit more feisty, I would say. And the resentment probably started about then. My grandma did the very best that she could with us as far as trying to teach us how to be good young women and to be kind. And I am who I am today because of her, undoubtedly. She
Nice.
never spoke an ill word about my mother, not once. And if my mom showed up at her house, she always opened the door to her and let her in. And that is how I try to live my life to this day, is how she modeled for us to treat people like people,
Mm.
even though my mom had done horrific things to her, horrific things to her son, horrific things to her grandchildren. She always treated her like a person. And I got to witness that firsthand. My mom came to see me whenever I was 12. It was for my 12th birthday. And my sister, like I said, has a birthday 8 days later. My mom was very strung out at this time, probably one of the worst times that I can remember seeing her. um, she was missing quite a few teeth. She had a black eye. She had a boyfriend that she flat out told us pistol whipped her. And she was getting us to try to beg my dad to help her. And obviously, we loved her. She was our mom. So we would go to dad crying and say, "Hey, help her." And then he would say no. And then we would get mad. It was just a very, I guess, toxic cycle for quite a while. And we got to go see my mom sometimes on the weekends whenever she was okay, but she would do things like take us to chicken fights, like illegal chicken fights. And then my dad would find out about this. Or, like her and her boyfriends would get into fights and then we would have to call the law and she wouldn't let us leave. And it was just, she was very much self-sabotaged herself, but
Yeah.
you couldn't have convinced her of that. Like she was always the victim. Like always the victim. Well, on my 12th birthday, she said, "I'll be back to see your sister on her birthday." My sister and I sat out on our porch swing at my grandma's house, and my mom never showed up. So for 4 years, we didn't see her after that. We didn't know if she was alive. We didn't know if she was dead. We had gotten word that she was staying like a mile up the road from our house and just would drive by and not even stop to see her kids. Um, that rocked on for quite a while. And one of her cousins, actually, it was her nephew. I'm sorry, it was one of my cousins. Her nephew showed up at my dad's house whenever I was 16 and asked us if we knew where my mom was because she had stolen dope from him. And he wanted his dope or he wanted her. And I was like, "We haven't seen her at all, but like people that she was running with would try to come find us and find out where she was." We had no clue. We hadn't seen her either. We'd like to know as well. So, I mean, if you see her, tell her kid said hi. But nonetheless, my dad was still working. He had ended up getting remarried. I had moved into, I would say, my angry teenager phase by this point. I had a lot of resentment towards my mom. I had no love for her whatsoever, not even a little bit. And if I never saw her again during that period of time in my life, I would have been okay. I became very hyper fixated on my grandma. I was very terrified that something was going to happen to her. I got homesick to like the point that I would not go stay the night at people's houses. I think that was very much a PTSD trauma response of just not wanting to be left. Come to find out, years later, I've deduced that's what it's from. My dad and I did not have a super great relationship. His wife at the time and I did not get along. We didn't get along well at all. I ended up moving out from his house and moving into my grandma's with her and stayed there up until I was 16. My sister and I, a little backstory on my sister. She got diagnosed with epilepsy when she was 11, so she wasn't allowed to drive. I had, whenever we became teenagers, we went everywhere together because I would have to drive us. And so almost all of our teenage years, we worked at the same places. It was just more convenient that way. But she worked at Sonic and I worked at Sonic, and she had to pull a shift one night that I wasn't there. And I had to go. I was hanging out with my boyfriend at the time. His name was Parker. And Parker's mom was in prison. So he understood kind of where I was with having like a toxic mom relationship. And he was kind of fostered by a youth pastor and his wife at the time. So he was very active in church. I was very active in church with him. And, Parker was like a very good person for me at the time to be around. I was cutting at the time, just to feel something. and he was there with me during that. I had an eating disorder. So, I mean, I was very bulimic. He was with me during that. And it was all just kind of very toxic teenage year. My sister called me while she was at work one night. I was hanging out with Parker and she said, "You're never going to guess who's here." She was working at Sonic. And I said, "Who?" And she said, "Mom." And I said, "Good for her. Good for her." She said, "She wants to see you." And I said, I didn't care. I don't want to see her. I had no desire whatsoever to go see her. And Parker was like, "We need to go see your mom." And I said, I don't really want to. I was pretty bitter, pretty angry, had no desire whatsoever. But Parker explained to me, like, "Hey, every Sunday we go to the prison and visit my mom. You need to go see your mom." And I was like, "Okay, fine." So we loaded up. We went to where my sister was, and my mom was in the back seat of an old Cavalier. I'll never forget it. It was kind of like a greenish gray color, and her boyfriend that used to beat her all the time was driving. There was another guy in the front seat. I don't know who he was, but my mom was so strung out. And she was like, "Hey, how are you doing? You look great." Well, like just chit chatting like the years had not passed, like it had not been 4 years since she had laid eyes on us. And I was a pretty much a full grown woman at this time. My sister stayed in touch with her after that. I didn't have hardly anything at all to do with her. My sister would kind of give me updates here and there, about how mom was doing. I was out doing my own thing. Parker and I ended up breaking up. And then at 17, I got with another guy and ended up getting pregnant while I was in high school. I found out 2 weeks before I graduated. And I got married when I turned 18, 8 days after I turned 18, and had my first daughter on Thanksgiving Day. And so she and I literally grew up together. I rushed into a marriage that I wasn't ready for. I was a kid trying to raise a kid, struggling. I was not a good wife at all. I wasn't ready to be a wife. That's really not what God had planned for me. And my mom wasn't there for any of that. My sister told her that I had my first daughter and this, that, and the other. And my mom was still using drugs, but I swore that I would never allow my mom to do to my kids what she had done to me and my sister. So she would never be a part of their life. And as far as I was concerned, she would never be a part of mine. Um, that marriage rocked on. I was unfaithful pretty much the entire time that I was married to my ex husband. And I ended up getting pregnant with my second daughter whenever I was 19. So I spent the majority of my early adult life either pregnant or having babies, one of the two. So by the time I hit 21, I was ready to sow my wild oats because I had not gotten to do that yet. And so I was just out living my best life. During the course of me living my best life, or what I thought was my best life, I had obviously gotten out of church. I wasn't living the way that God wanted me to live my life. And as I'd said before, I was raised in church. I knew God. I had been saved at a young age. I was baptized. It's not like I did not have a good solid foundation for how to live. I strayed just like I think the vast majority of people do. Well, my husband at the time was Gone Pipeline and he worked on the pipeline. And during that time I was having an affair on him and ended up getting into a relationship, a same-sex relationship with a female that I'd gone to school with. And that was definitely a road that was not meant for me to travel, but down it I went. And it's like the more people that hated it, the more I wanted that relationship. So I I absolutely rebelled. I took into no account whatsoever the effect that it would have on my kids, none at all. The effect that it had on my reputation, didn't care about that. The effect that it had on my family. My grandma, who was so influential in my life, absolutely hated the fact, obviously, because it's not biblical. I shouldn't have been in that relationship at all. But here I was stepping off into it. And I was still trying to go to church. I was still taking her with me to church. And, church members would come up to me and whisper in my ear, "I can't believe you're doing this. I'm praying for you." And this is a church I'd gone to my entire life. And they made a decision to get together and vote me off the church roll. So that was my first experience with church hurt. Yeah. I was voted completely off the church roll. And that was my first experience with church hurt. So I stopped going. Yeah, I stopped going altogether. And me and my grandmother got into quite a large argument, and she didn't talk to me for an entire year. And everything in me, because of how I was living my life, I didn't care.
Yeah.
I didn't care at all that, I was doing wrong. Didn't bother me in the least. But she had told me that she was going to continue to pray and that she would pray me out of that lifestyle. And of course, That made me angry, and I did not care. Because I didn't see anything at all wrong with what I was doing. So after about a year of being in that relationship and leaving church, my grandma called me one day and she said, I just want you to know, like I hadn't talked to her like since we left church. And she said, I just want you to know that I love you no matter what. I don't want you to have to go through this alone. And we ended up reconciling that relationship. My sister had still been talking to my mom during this time. So a lot kind of was going on tumultuously. My dad's always just kind of been in the background. He's just kind of a whatever type dude. So I don't want you to think that he's non-existent. He's just a hard worker. Do you know what I'm
Right, right,
saying?
right.
He's just one of
Absolutely.
those that's like, you go live your life. If you need me, call me. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the
yeah.
way my daddy's always been. Well, my sister had been talking to my mom. She told me that mom had been clean for a little while, and I said, I need proof. I need proof.
Receipts. Show me the
Yeah,
receipts.
she's gonna have to take a drug test. And at this time, I was dispatching full time at the police department, and I had access. I'd already made plans to go to the police academy, but I wanted mom to prove it, and so she did. She took a piss test, and come to find out, she was clean. She was smoking weed, but she was clean. But she had started drinking quite heavily, and so she was hitting the bars. And my mom had always been a gypsy, and she was hitting the bars. She ended up hooking up with this old boy named Robbie, and they were going to go playing bars in Texas. I don't know. He played guitar. So that was their big plan. So my mom was kind of in and out for just a little bit. I did let her start coming around, get involved with the kids, get involved with me, but I always kept her kind of at arm's distance.
Okay.
Um, because I didn't trust her. And she did stay clean. She got herself sober and she was clean off meth, but she traded in one vice for another and she started drinking quite a bit. During this time that I was in the same sex relationship the first time, because there was twice, the first girl I was with, that was a very, very tumultuous relationship. I was working at the police department. It was a very mentally abusive, physically abusive relationship. And I stayed and I shouldn't have because my kids witnessed a whole lot that they shouldn't have.
Right.
And after 2 years of staying in that relationship, I finally got out by God's grace. And I had told her that I would never leave unless she came in one day and told me that she didn't love me anymore. She had been cheating on me after I found out, but she came in one day and said, I just don't love you anymore. And that's what broke me. And finally, I was broke, like something in me just said, "Okay, I'm done." And I actually left and stayed gone. Like the best friend I told you about, she was like, "No, you're not. We're not going back into this. You're out. You're staying out." And then I went from that relationship into another same sex relationship. Um, like I said, I at that time didn't see anything at all wrong with how I was living my life. My grandma was still very much involved with me. I knew every day she was still praying. Um, and that woman I actually ended up marrying. They passed a law in Arkansas for I'm talking like a week that you could legally marry. So we jumped on it and we went and got married. She was an alcoholic. She was an alcoholic from the day that I got with her, but I was not a big drinker. I was a police officer, so I didn't drink a whole lot at the time. But we always just made excuses for it. Like they were always like, oh, that's just how she is. You know what I'm saying? This is the way
Right.
she's always been. And before I knew it, like 4 years had passed and I was right there with her. Like it was one of those, a lot had happened
Yeah.
during those 4 years. She drank almost every day, or she did drink every day. It's not almost every day. Like she drank every day. My mom had started coming back around. My mom was an alcoholic. So they drank together every day. My mom, that was kind of how they bonded. And then policing, I had finally been in long enough that we were hanging out with people that drank all the time. So I would drink socially. And then before I knew it, I was working night shift. And then I would get off in the morning and I would have me a drink to go to bed. And then I would get up in the afternoon and I would have me a drink before I would pick the kids up from school. And about 4 years in, I was a full blown alcoholic myself. And it was all the time. The Holy Spirit chased after me the whole time. I always felt the need to get back in church, always. And to the point that I even told her, I was like, we need to go to church. Like, I need to get my kids in church. I was raised in church. Like, we need to go to church. So we started going to church. And, they welcomed us with open arms. And we were never allowed to join the church roll or, so we could vote and do things like that. But they never shunned us and they showed us so much grace and so much love. but we were still drinking every day. Like, we would get out of church and we would go buy a fifth of or we would have a fifth of vodka and we would start drinking. And I just thought it was the funniest thing in the world that my 7-year-old knew how to mix my drinks. I was like, haha, this is hilarious. In hindsight, no, it's not very funny. But we would make jokes all the time because my ex-husband had gotten remarried and he had threatened a handful of times to take me back to court for custody. Now, mind you, at this time, I was working as a deputy at the sheriff's office and I was drinking all the time. I was taking my kids to duck clubs, hanging out with my friends. I would drink and get drunk at a duck club and then drive myself back home because in my head, I was a cop. And what were they going to do? Stop me and take me to jail? Like, I literally had that thought more times than once. Like, I'm just going from here to here. If I get pulled over, they're just going to let me go. I'm in my county. That's what I thought to myself. And by the grace of God, somehow I managed to never have a wreck or to go to jail. I don't know how I managed that. I was drunk driving so many times with my kids in the car, man. Just the sheer recklessness of what I was doing makes me cringe to this day. My ex-husband was like, "Hey, we're gonna go back to court." I always just thought he was bluffing, and on top of that, I was thinking to myself, like, in the state of Arkansas, who's gonna take 2 kids from their mom, especially one who's a cop?
Right.
But that day came. The day came, he took me back to court. Obviously, I had 0 lack of accountability. I was still drinking, and me and my ex would make jokes all the time whenever I got served my court papers, like, the kids would be fighting in the back seat, and I regret these words so much. Like, if I could take them back, I would, but, you can't do that. I would say to her, "Every other weekend doesn't sound so bad, right?" Like, I remember saying those words because the girls would be fighting in the back seat, and I was like, "Every other weekend don't sound too bad, right?" And then the day came. We went to court, and the judge made his ruling, and I lost my kids.
Oh,
The thing that I never in my entire life dreamed would happen, happened, and I lost my kids. And every other weekend sucked. Every other weekend sucked really bad because my kids had to leave. They couldn't live with me no more. And that was God's mercy because had they stayed with me, I wouldn't have quit. I wouldn't have quit drinking.
yeah.
Um, and God knew that I wouldn't hit my knees on my own, so He brought me to Him. And it's because of everything I'd gone through with my mom. He knew that my kids were my vice. That's what would do it for me, is he had to make a believer out of me, truthfully. And of course, I was in a relationship with an alcoholic, so we did everything we could to blame everybody else. It was not our fault that we lost the kids. It was because their dad and their stepmom were evil and, everything in the world, every excuse in the book. And then finally one day I was like, no, no, this is me. I was depressed. I had contemplated suicide a couple different times because obviously I'd lost everything that was important to me. Nothing else mattered anymore. The world would have been better off without me as far as I was concerned. And I was like, no, things need to change. Things need to change. So I made the decision then. I was like, I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to quit smoking. I'm going to go on a diet all in the same day. And if I'm a hateful heifer, I'm not going to know which one caused it. I'm just going to full send all of it. And I did. I just cold turkeyed all of it. And things started changing. I was still going to church a little, not like I should, but I eventually decided that that wasn't a relationship I wanted to be in anymore. She was still drinking all the time. Her and my mom were still hanging out drinking all the time. And I just was fed up. I would go to work and I would deal with drunks all day and then come home and I had to deal with 2 more whenever I got there. And, it's really hard to deal with 2 people drinking whenever you're not drinking. So it gets quite obnoxious relatively fast. So I ended up making a mental decision to leave that relationship. I was too cowardly at the time to step out physically in that relationship. So, of course, I did what Kristen normally does and started having an affair. I'd had a couple while I was in that marriage with her already, gotten caught. We worked things out. Um, I was out a handful of times prior and kept coming back, just kept running back to my sin, man. I don't know why we do that, but
Hmm.
I did. But I ended up having an affair and we ended up we got caught again. And this time it was kind of like, okay, well, we're out. We're just going to do it. We ended up getting together. That's who I'm married to now, Willie. So, um, he left his wife, I left mine, and we've been together pretty much ever since. But I'm a firm believer that he was my saving grace,
Amen.
truthfully. I understand that our relationship didn't come from, the greatest of circumstances, but he brought me a lot of clarity during some very dark times in my life. And he has always been such an encourager. That's just his nature. And he is very calm nature. Like whenever I'm spiraling, he's chill. But right, right we got together in 2018 and we've been together ever since. But my grandma passed a year later and she told me that she had prayed me out of that relationship. And I believe that with all my heart. Like that was 7 years of a faithful woman's prayers. And
And on that note, real quick, what the thing I always notice now is to add to that is we were talking about that before we went on here about how you don't get to see, when you're putting work in or planting the seeds and God's doing the watering, right? You don't get to see
Mhm,
it. But what an amazing testimony that your grandma got to see that.
mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, can you imagine, like, where she's at? And
Oh,
I mean,
100%.
we as Christians, we don't get to see a lot of the seeds that we plant blossom. We have to have that faith that it does.
Mhm.
And your grandma's testimony to be able to see it. Could you imagine that feeling?
I I can't. I mean, I hope one day that I do get to feel what she felt in that moment, but it is so amazing to me, her faithfulness.
Yeah.
In 7 years, she never once gave up. Not on me. I'm just a person. She
Yeah.
never gave up on God.
Yeah.
She believed in a God that was so much bigger than anything else and that he would do it and he could do it. Not in her time because she would have prayed me out of that relationship the very next day if that was her will.
Yeah.
She but she trusted God's timing, and
Mm,
it's because of his timing that I have the testimony that I have, and to me, that's so amazing.
it
So
is.
before she passed, she did get to see me out of that relationship, and that is truthfully inspiring to me now because that was just the start of how God was working in my life. Um Things got a little crazy after that. Willie and I don't have the same belief system. Like he has his own thing. I don't even know what to call it. His relationship with God is his relationship with God. That's all I can say.
Okay.
Mine's a little bit more structured. I would, if you can call it that. I don't know. Is there any such thing as structure? Um, my kids had a lot of resentment towards me for good
Mm,
reason, for very good reason. They were living with their dad, and my mom was, still doing whatever mom does. She was still drinking and living in Texas with Robbie or North Carolina. I don't know. Yeah, I never knew from time to time where she was. She would just send me a message or call. Um, and my sister got married during this time. Her and her husband moved. We all ended up moving to the same town. Like, long story short, we wound up back in the same place again together. Now, during this time, obviously, I had left law enforcement, went bail bonding, did that for two years. That was a wild ride. That was interesting. Met a lot of really cool people. Saw some really ugly sides to the justice system that kind of probably changed how I viewed law enforcement after I left law enforcement the first time. And man, that was interesting. And then working at the hospital, I genuinely never ever dreamed that I would come back and be a cop. Like I never wanted to. I won't lie. That was not something I wanted for myself at all. I was done with law enforcement. You couldn't have paid me enough to be a cop again. The stress level was gone. I didn't want that. I went to work at the hospital, loved it. I loved working in the emergency room. I got to help people. People love nurses. That was fantastic. I wanted to go to nursing school. That's what I was going to do. And then my brother in law called me and said, "Hey, I took a chief's job. Do you want to come work for me?" And I said, "No, no sir, I don't. I do not want to go back to work for you or go to work being the police." And he said, "All right, well, I just wanted to call you." I had talked about it on and off because once you police, it kind of gets in your blood. But like, my heart wasn't there. And then, as God would have it, um, you tell him your plans, and he'll tell you a joke.
hmm.
So here I am back to policing. Um, and I really don't know how it happened. I just took a leap of faith, I guess you could say. I don't know. I was like, man, it's kind of weird that he would offer me that. And then here's my opportunity. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. Now, mind you, I've been back in church and that I will get into that in just a minute. Let me get back to the trauma. So, about 5 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, right? It was right after Willie and I got together. My mom got diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver. Um, During her drug use, she contracted Hep C. It went undiagnosed for quite a while because she was using dirty needles, so we didn't know until she got sick and we had to take her to the emergency room and they found out that she had Hep. And she was in end-stage liver failure by the time we found out because she had been living with Hep for so long and drinking for so long that it had just shot her liver. But without fail, my mom did not give up her alcohol. She was going to continue to smoke, continue to drink. She did go into remission for the hepatitis. They got her on some medicine for that, and we went into remission. Um, she that rocked on. She was stubborn, like to a fault, up until the bitter end. She didn't want to take her medicine right. She didn't want to do any of this right. She didn't want to stop drinking. She didn't want to stop smoking. She didn't want to stay home because she had Arkansas Medicaid, so we could do that. She wanted to live her best life. So I was always my sister took it a lot more personal than I did. I was always just like, if this is what mom wants, let mom go. I guess I was still hanging on to quite a bit of trauma,
Yeah.
resentment, you could say. I didn't know that's what it was. I considered myself just letting her live her life, but um it was the not caring that was the resentment because that was how I protected myself.
Yeah.
So, a couple years rocked on. She would come home for some paracentesis, where they go in and pull the fluid off around
Yeah.
the liver. That was just therapeutic. Obviously, cirrhosis can't be
Yeah.
reversed. She wasn't eligible for a liver transplant because she would never stop drinking. So, and she wouldn't quit smoking. She would have to quit drinking and quit smoking, and she wouldn't do either. So she was never going to be eligible for that. And she just wasn't well enough. She had COPD. I mean, there was a lot going on. She came home, um, I want to say January of this year, and I had to take her for a paracentesis, but she was having a lot happened. Like, I mean, she was in and out of the hospital. Her ammonia would get jacked up. She would have to go to the emergency room. We'd get her ammonia, level. It was just, if you've ever dealt with anybody with cirrhosis, it's like a roller coaster, just constantly. I mean, but this is where a lot of the resentment came in. My mom was never married after her and my dad got a divorce. And so me and my sister were her next of kin. And if anything ever happened to her, it was on us to make sure that arrangements were made. And, we got her to and from doctor's appointments. We were her medical power of attorneys. And like, it was just a lot. And it was hard to deal with because all I could ever think about is you never took care of us. Like, why do I have to take care of you? Like constantly, like you literally like this. And if I'm being totally honest, like I always just thought to myself, like, dang, you're such a burden. You know what I mean? Like, 'cause seriously, like the only thing you have ever brought me is pain my entire life. Like, that's it. Like now I just get to watch you suffer constantly.
Yeah.
Like that's no fun. Um, so this past January, she came home. She had to get a paracentesis, but their fluid wasn't just around her liver. It was now in the bottom part of her lung. So they had to do a different kind of fluid pool, I guess you could say. And since they did it different this time, they sent the fluid off to have it tested. Why this time? I don't know because this is therapeutic. We do this all the time. But this time they sent it off and had it tested. And come to find out, she had colon cancer cells in her lungs.
Yeah.
So we found out in January that she had cancer in two places for sure. As stubborn as my mom was, she was like, "We're going to fight this. We're going to fight this. It's going to be okay." Because she had cancer in two places, they automatically deemed her terminal,
Yeah.
especially with it being colon and lung. They wouldn't do a PET scan because they needed a positive biopsy. And, insurance is stupid. I'm not even gonna lie to you. It was long and drug out for absolutely no freaking reason. My personal opinion. I'm just very grateful that I worked. And this is what I'm telling you. This is how God works. Okay. Tell me if you see it. I worked in the emergency room for so long that I made a lot of friends while I worked there. So every time my mom would get sick and go to the hospital, which happened quite frequently, um, they would just do a new scan
Yeah.
on a different part of her body every time. So it was like putting a puzzle together. But eventually, because her insurance was dragging their feet about getting the PET scan over the course of about a month, we ended up having about 5 different CT scans of different parts of my mom's body. So we knew that she had lesions on her lung. We knew that she had colon cancer. And she wanted to do chemo, but obviously, because she was in end stage liver failure, she was not eligible for any immunotherapy treatment. And we tried to explain that to her that palliative care was going to be her best option. And we just wanted her to be able to live out whatever remaining time that God saw fit that she had on this earth comfortably. But she was very stubborn, as I said, to the death. And after different hospital visits, things kind of started getting a little weird with her because it's almost like her mind was going just a little bit. I attributed it in the beginning to just her being overwhelmed and trauma,
Mm,
her ammonia levels being too high,
yeah.
things like that. It was jacking with her brain. And part of it probably is. I mean, between her having the COPD and needing to be on oxygen now because she's retaining so much fluid, things just got weird. Come to find out, she had a couple spots on her left kidney. She had a spot on the lymph node in the side of her neck, and she had some lesions on her spine in the lower part of her back. So she was pretty much eat up with cancer. Um, my husband is a UFC fight coach, so we go all over normally to the UFC fights. And he had a fighter who had a fight in Miami, Florida in April. My mom had been in and out of the hospital. We'd been taking her to doctor's appointments, oncology appointments, doing all the stuff and all the things because that's what she wanted. She refused to go on hospice. She didn't want to be a DNR. She didn't want to do any of these things. And it was just, I mean, it was physically taxing on me and my sister. It was emotionally taxing on everybody. And we were if she wanted to fight it, though, that's what we were going to do. We were going to fight it. My mom had gone into the hospital the week before the fight. The fight was April 12th, and she had gotten released on that Monday. She had spent 7 days in the hospital because her breathing wasn't great and got out that Monday. We were supposed to leave that Tuesday to go to Miami for the UFC fights. I told my sister, I said, if you want me to stay, I'll stay. I'd already sent hospice to mom's house to try to get them to talk with her. She sent them away. But because my sister was medical proxy, pretty much, they had enlisted her anyway for hospice, which I was grateful for. So my sister was like, no, we had already discussed that we had to continue living our lives. We can't just stop living because mom's sick. So I made the decision then that I was going to go ahead and fly to Miami and go to the UFC fights. We got down there on Wednesday. I stayed Wednesday and Thursday. My sister called me at 12 a.m. on Friday morning and she said, Mom's back in the hospital. And I said, what happened? And she said that they were at their camper, her and Robbie, and mom had fallen getting up to go to the bathroom and Robbie couldn't get her up out of the floor. So my sister and my brother-in-law got up to go get her up out of the floor. And when they got there, my mom was like barely breathing. They called 911. Her oxygen saturation was 70 and she was unresponsive. So I said, what are they doing with her? And they said she's in the trauma room right now, but they're fixing to move her to ICU. So I got up, I packed my stuff, I went to the airport. I got the next flight, direct flight home to Arkansas, and caught a plane and flew home. On that flight, I had nobody to talk to. I mean, I left my husband in Miami. My kids were back home. My sister was at the hospital with my mom. It was just me and God. That's all I had. And I've been back in church for a long time. God has really done a work in my life, and I've seen the Holy Spirit move. And prior to my mom getting put back in the hospital, she had told me whenever I was talking things over about the DNR with her that she said she didn't want a DNR because she wanted them to bring her back once. That way she could tell us everything that she needed to tell us. And I was like, that does not work like that. You're not guaranteed that second chance. If there's things that you need to say, you need to say them now. And she refused. She didn't want to be an DNR. And I said, okay, fine. On that flight home, I prayed and I prayed, and prayers that didn't come out as words. It was just tears. And I was like, dear God, please just let her wake up so she can say what she needs to say. And I got home. I drove myself straight to the hospital. She was in the ICU room and she was still asleep. But because she was on hospice, they weren't giving her any of her medications. So she wasn't medicated. She wasn't on morphine. She wasn't on any of her normal cirrhosis medication. So she was not medically induced in any way. And I asked my sister, I said, do you want to go home and change clothes? I'll sit with her while you're gone. And she said, yeah, if you don't care, I'll go home. And I said, okay. We only lived 10 minutes from the hospital. So my sister left. My kids were there with me and I was rubbing my mom's head, and they had done a scan while she was in the emergency room the night before and found a lesion on her brain. So we knew that she had a brain tumor as well at this point. And this was literally just like 24 hours prior that we found out about the brain tumor, which now explains why a lot of the crap she said didn't make no sense. But she started to open her eyes. And she looked up at me and she said, Hoppy is what she called me. She said, Hoppy, my head hurts. And I said, I know, Mama. I said, please stay awake until I can get Shiloh back here. And I called my sister and I said, "Mom's awake. You need to come back." And so she turned around and she came back and she said, I said, "Do you want some medicine?" And she said, "Yeah, my head hurts." And I said, "Okay." So I told the nurse, I said, "We're fixing to start giving her the morphine." And she, they explained to us already, like, once you start, like, it's pretty much downhill slide from there. And my sister made it back and she looked up at her and she said, "I'm so blessed and I love y'all so much." And she just smiled just like a little kid. Like I can't explain to you. It's like looking at a baby. Just her smiling and she was saying, "I'm so happy." And she closed her eyes and that was the last conversation we had. But God heard my prayer on that plane that came out not in words. It was just a conversation and he answered me. I prayed it with an honest heart and he heard me and he answered me and he answered my mama's prayers. And
What day was that?
that was Fight Day. Actually, that was April the 11th. My mom died Fight Day, April the 12th. My kids,
My mom passed away April 15th.
I'm sorry.
Same thing. Sources the live.
How ironic, huh?
Wow.
It was super hard. My kids also had prom April the 12th. So I would have been in Miami during the prom. And I think that God doesn't make no mistakes, you
No.
know? I was home. Thank you. I was home, getting my kids ready for their prom because, like I said, we knew mom was in the hospital. And I had already gone over that morning and sat with her, played her some music and rubbed her hand. And you have so many regrets,
Yeah.
like questions whenever it's at the end of their time and you're just like, am I doing the right thing? Because I've made her so many promises that I would never let her suffer. And so I was like, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? I question that a lot. Sorry. Am I doing the right thing? And, God constantly reassured me that I was doing the right thing, that this was mercy because her physical life was not one worth living. Like it was just hospital visit after hospital visit and hospital stay after hospital stay and medicines and doctor's appointments. There was no quality of life there. And my mom and I had talked a lot since I'd gotten back in church about God and about our faith and about the love of the Lord. And it was just, I got to see God work literally firsthand. My kids got to see God work firsthand. My sister, I get to tell people this story of that can only be God. My mom had been unresponsive for 16 hours, 16, for her to wake up for 7 minutes to get to tell her family goodbye, just to go
Dang.
back to sleep. And I was at home, um, getting my kids ready, and I had this overwhelming feeling at 1:43 to call the hospital and check on her. I had to come home. Like I said, I'd gone over and sat with her that morning, and I had to come home and help the girls. At 1:48, her boyfriend, Robbie, called me and said, "Your mom passed." And, I know with every single bit of my soul that my mom passed at 1:43. That's why I felt the overwhelming need to call and check. That was, I don't believe that God lets a believer suffer before leaving this earth. And her physical body did not pass until 1:48. Her spirit left at 1:43, and I can't be convinced otherwise of that. And it's ironic, I can't remember crap else, but I can tell you all of that.
Yeah.
Like I said, God has done a tremendous work in my life. Whenever Willie and I got together, we weren't in church. We were bell bonding. We were living in a totally different town. I mean, I cussed like a sailor. I smoked. I would drink every once in a while. I had recovered from alcoholism, but I would still have a drink every once in a while. But obviously, due to the affair, Willie and his kids obviously, well, one of his sons did not have a great relationship. His oldest son and him had a great relationship, but his youngest son and him did not. Partially, that's due to the fact that there's only 3 years separating me and his youngest son. There's almost 20 years difference between me and Willie, but there was just a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. His
Yeah.
son got in church. Him and his wife and their family got into church, where we go to church at now, and they got linked up with a couple there that were some marriage counselors and some spiritual counselors, and those people poured into them. And then Rudy made the decision, Willie's son, to call and they started mending some bridges and they started inviting us to church. Well, we still live so far away that we didn't go, but it's funny how we negotiate with God. When we decided to get out of bail bonding, I wasn't in church, but I'd prayed and prayed, and I was like, "Dear Lord, please, we wanna move back home. If there's any way that you can just let this loan go through on this house, I promise I'll start going back to church." We start playing that game, and, he did. We got the loan for the house, and, I made good on my word. I started going back to church. And I went to church with his son and his wife and their beautiful family, and, well, we went for quite a while. We ended up doing a class called Reengage. If they ever have one near you, I would encourage you to find it. It's a couples class where you and your wife can go and do that. We were connected in that with a lot of other groups of couples, and we just really, got to know one another, shared a lot of experiences, shared a lot of stories, and we all still stay in touch to this day, and that's been 3 years ago. But during that, I was sitting in church. I fell under conviction very hard to the point like my entire body just got hot. I mean, like, I imagine I haven't made it to menopause yet, but I imagine that's exactly what a hot flash feels like. Willie has to go pee all the time, so he gets up all through the service and goes to the bathroom. But this time he waited till the invitation and he said, "I'm fixing to go to the bathroom." And I said, "Okay." And as soon as he stood up and walked off, I got up, I took everything out of my pockets, I laid my phone in the seat, and I don't know how I made it to the front of that church. I honestly felt like I floated. I don't know how else to explain it. It was by no will of my own, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And, I couldn't tell you, I don't know. It felt like I floated. And I told our pastor, I said, "I need to rededicate my life and I need to get baptized today." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "Today." I said, "If I don't do it today, then I won't do it." And I rededicated my life, and that was my Saul moment. That was my Saul to Paul. It was literally clean. That's all I can describe. It's just when I came up out of those water, I was clean. It's like the scales fell off my eyes. What I thought I wanted for my life, I didn't want anymore. Things I thought I knew were different. And I started a different season. And God was getting me ready. He was getting me ready for a lot even then, because if it hadn't have been for those small people, like you said, planting those seeds in Rudy, who planted a seed in me, who got me back in church, then I wouldn't have had the strength to have gotten through my mom's death with grace,
Yeah.
because I remember how I felt that Monday when she got out of the hospital and she had turned down hospice. I was mad at her. I was so mad. I was like, "I can't believe she's doing this. This is so selfish. It's just like her." All of that resentment just bubbled up in me. But God humbled me through that care, and I got to talk to one of my friends the other day who's going through a very similar situation that I did back in April, and it was not by any small feat. My husband is security at the hospital, and she was there seeing her mom, and it just so happened I'd taken him lunch, and we were walking out at the same time, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And she told me, she said, "My mom's here. She's got lung cancer." And I got to stop in that moment and hug her neck and tell her I love her, and I know this is gonna be hard, but her mom was very similar to my mom, so we had a whole lot of shared stories. But one thing I gained, I was thinking to myself, why my story with my mom is so important. And it's because despite the fact that she was not a good mother to me, she taught me how to be a good mother. And it was by her failure that I gained every single bit of knowledge that I have. But she wasn't, you know, I don't know. Sometimes his prevention is his protection.
Yeah. Man.
And And that's kinda where I feel like I'm at with it, is my kids got to witness things that only God can do, and
Yeah.
we have very much reconciled our relationship. Their dad and I are good, their stepmom and I are great now. Like, I mean, God has literally showed up and showed out in my life,
When
and
when when you go, your testimony and your walk as faith is just beautiful. When you go through things though, I've been going through this season right now of being recognizing blessings, recognizing and thanking God for the blessings, whether they're small or not. And when I say that, I'm not talking about like, oh, this is a blessing. Thank you, God. Like I'm talking about like stuff I prayed for years ago and just little stuff. Like it's so weird. So, and then I heard you say right now, I wanted to not correct it, but bring the awareness to you. When you talk about you being at that hospital, bringing your husband lunch and your friend being there, And I know I hear it in your voice. You're very, very educated and very smart about God. There's no coincidences. Do you
No,
get what I'm
they don't
saying?
exist.
And I heard you say that. It's you know
Mhm.
how it's kind of weird that I was there. No, it wasn't. Not at all. Nothing's
It's
weird.
not weird.
It's nothing
You're
weird.
right.
You know, nothing's weird because um he put her right in your path for that reason. You know,
Mhm.
she needed to hear she needed you from somebody that's been there and done that. She needed to hear that you're gonna be okay, you know. These are the things that the last 3 months I've been really recognizing a big part of my life that's just like it's just amazing, and I'll share with one you. I know we're still going live, but I'll share one with you. I prayed for my sister and her daughter were going at it. And I just did a small little prayer and I just prayed, like, hey, and I watched it. It rekindled quickly days later.
Mhm.
And I'm like, and this is nothing short of what this, this is huge. You know what I mean? This is
Yeah.
bigger than both of us. It's like you lean
It
in
is
and
truly miraculous.
yes, so beautiful. When I
No,
lost
you're
my
right.
mom, when I lost my mom, Christine, I sat here and I teared up because I told you before we got on here, I don't know what the draw was. You know what I mean? I don't know what
Mhm.
the paths were. Um, but it's so weird to hear because you tell people this story. Like, so when I tell my testimony, I talk about my mom and when she passed. So it hit me really hard when you talked about like how she was kind of out of it. So when my mom passed, I remember it 3 days. She went to the hospital. She was stubborn too. And 3 days it took her to pass, but each day progressively got worse where she was calling me other people's names and my brother's name and her brother's names, my uncles. And I had a regret for a long time. I had given her I brought a beer to the hospital on her dying deathbed because the day she was in there and they told us that she would die pretty much any hour. We were just there. That's what she asked me for. She wanted a tuna sandwich and a beer. And I didn't know what to do. You know what I mean? I wasn't uh anywhere near God at that point in my life. I mean, I didn't not believe in God. I didn't not go to church type of thing, but I wasn't even in the prayer stage of my life where I could lean into him like that. I didn't know enough about him. I did it, and but that haunted me for a long time. More so than the things I did in my life. I knew she was going, but it was like, man, did you have to do it like that? You know what I mean? It was like
Yeah.
beat me up. So when I hear you tell that, man, it's just an amazing testimony because it's just huge. It's awesome.
Well, I would say, I actually was telling my friend this 2 days ago that my grandma's been gone for almost 5 years, and she pretty much was my mom, you know? But I don't think about her. I don't think about her every day. I don't I know she's okay. I know that's what she wanted. But I can't take my mom's obituary down off my refrigerator. I literally think about her every single day. I cry over her all the time, and I don't know what I know that serves a purpose, but I don't know
Yeah.
what that purpose is yet.
Yeah.
Um, but I know that it will serve a purpose in its time, and whatever is supposed to be made manifest will be made manifest, and it will. Um, but it's just this I too have been walking through this weird season, but I'm glad that you brought that to my attention, and I will work on it. I will do better because that is something that I think needs to be broken inside me is, like if he deserves all the honor and glory. God deserves all of it. So I don't know why we sometimes try to discredit things, and that's exactly what I just did. You know what I'm
My
saying?
brother
That
taught me this. If it's we're putting God in a box.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? We put God in a box and it's like, and I was doing that before I got on here and told you what happened to me. I was doing that. I was like, I don't want to bring that to God. Like, that's so petty. You know what I mean? I don't want to, how am I going to pray for this? Like, it's so petty. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I would just discourage myself from praying for small stuff and just pray for only the big stuff or pray for somebody's healing. And it's like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? And it just came to my thought one day. I'm like, man, all of a sudden I just started talking to him when I got back from my honeymoon. I just like every day I'm just talking. I jump in my car and I'm just talking out loud. Like I'm talking to you right now.
Mhm.
Like we're just best friends. Like he's sitting in the passenger seat. And I'm just like, man, it's just amazing. You know what I mean? It just so I once you stop doing that, like it's hard though because people think you're crazy.
But,
You know?
I don't I would have to go look it up and I'll send you the verse, but our pastor actually talked about that today, about how whenever you actually follow God like you're supposed to follow God, the world is going to think you're crazy.
Yeah,
Like, and it even speaks of that in the Bible. So, I mean,
yeah.
let
Amen to
them,
that.
man.
Yeah, it's so
I do
crazy.
think it's our stories are more similar than what you probably even know. Like my daughter, she just enlisted. She's graduating this year. She just enlisted in the National Guard. So I think that's funny because you had mentioned that before we got on here and recorded. And as soon as you said it, I was like, dang, man, are we the same person? Like,
It's so nuts. So like, so I didn't hear your story. I told you before, I didn't hear your story. I went to go, I didn't want to, I wanted to be just as shocked as I just was. That's why I
yeah.
didn't want to hear it. But, and I'll say it on here. I said it offline, but, I don't know what the calling was, but, the Holy Spirit it put you across my path. And, I wanted to reach out to you, and my family could watch this and they're going to tell you the same thing. They would message you and tell you the same thing. Like, I really looked forward to
Hmm.
this interview because like I said, I wanted to see what he was talking about. And it's so crazy because everything you talk about, I went through, you know what I mean? Like I had a very, very poor childhood, you know what I'm saying? And on my testimony, I talk about a good day for me was, if my brother had a bottle of water for us to brush our teeth and wet my hair down because I didn't get haircuts and comb my hair. And we wear the same clothes for a week straight to go to school. And we lived out the back of my mom's car while she would spend the night at bars. She would park in the parking lots of bars, and my brother would take me to school from the parking lots. Everything, you know what I mean? Lice,
Yeah.
all everything, the whole thing. I lost my grandma about 4 years ago. I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago. And she was the same thing. She was like my mom too. She raised me because my mom was pretty much drinking and doing her thing too much, you know what I mean? And my grandma wasn't going to have it. And my grandma was very religious as well. So these are like, I mean, it's just, it's just crazy. It's
It's like
really,
the parallels are very, very, I mean, it's amazing, truthfully. And considering everybody always thinks that I became a cop because of how my mom was.
yeah,
Like,
nah,
everybody thinks that.
I don't think
That
so.
is no, that is not actually, I never wanted to be a cop. I wanted
Yeah,
to be a microbiologist is what
right.
I wanted to be. I wanted to look at germs through a microscope. You know what I'm saying? That's not
Yeah,
what I wanted to do. Um, how I became a cop is really very ironic. It's actually because of my sister.
yeah,
Like, I told you my sister's an epileptic and she lived with me. And after I got married, my sister moved in with me and she had a seizure one morning, and that was not uncommon, but then she turned right around and had another one right behind it. Like, after she came out of the first one, she had a second one, which was very weird, and I called 911. Like, in a panic, I just called 911, and we had a very small volunteer ambulance service, and they showed up and they were like, "Hey, you can ride with me if you want." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So I got in the back of this ambulance and they were like, "Do you wanna, like, volunteer to start coming to work with us?" So I started out on the ambulance and
yeah,
just as a volunteer. And I started doing that. And, once you get involved in first responding at all, you get to know everybody. So I got to know the dispatchers and the cops. And the dispatch supervisor hit me up one day. She said, "We've got an opening. Do you want to come to work?" And I was like, "Sure, I'm a stay at home mom. I don't got anything going. My sister lives with me. She can take care of the kids." And I went to work and I started dispatching. Like, that's how it all started. It didn't come from any sort of trauma at
yeah,
all. And, that's what I said earlier before we started recording is that my mission's so much different now than it was whenever I first started policing because who I was then doesn't even know who I am now.
right.
Like, I think God called me back to this because this is supposed to be my mission field. And everybody automatically assumes that a mission field is like some foreign country in Nepal or Africa or something, and you're going and taking kids water and building churches. No, like I literally get to go meet with people who every day, like our interactions are organic. I might meet you in the Dollar General parking lot, or I might meet you walking down the street, or I might pull you over on a traffic stop. But those interactions are people that are sometimes having the worst days of their life or at the lowest of lows. Like, I get a chance to potentially witness to you. Like, how
Mm,
cool is that? I
yeah,
may never know, like, who I talk to from day to day. I might
yeah,
talk to the same person every day, and then finally the conversation pops up and we get to talk about the Lord. It's pretty cool. But also, because of where I am, when I was working at the hospital, I would have never had enough time to sit down and create content. And God saw fit to send me to a little bitty tiny podunk town that I grew up in with less than 700 people. And we ride around for 10 hours and there's not a whole lot going. So I make funny videos and wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Look at where it landed me.
Yeah.
And now because of that, I got to meet you. I've met so many other really cool people on here and I get to tell my story, and man,
Amazing.
there's no such thing as coincidences.
There you go. Now you're talking. Hey,
Yeah,
I'm gonna close this up though. If you guys watch this video though, definitely let her know. If you guys want to reach out to her, her name is up here on the podcast. She has her Facebook page. Guys, I recommend to go check it out. It's definitely brighten your day. Christina, I appreciate you on this show. Don't go nowhere when I hang up right now because I want to talk to you a little bit more. But this is an amazing adventure. I would love to get you on one of our panels with a couple other people, and let's chop it up and talk about saving the world. You know what I mean? Let's do it. So I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna end this, and I will let you know when I go to post it, and we'll go from there. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.